And here we are on the maiden voyage. Actually, it's not really a maiden voyage, is it?
It's a shakedown.
We're definitely shaking stuff down.
Sea trials, shakedown.
And so we're anchored in, where are we, Leslie?
I don't know.
Susha.
Susha.
Susha in the San Juans.
Yeah, and it's cocktail hour, like I
Yeah.
said. And
Cheers.
we decided that we were going to sit down and talk about how this came to be and some of the decisions that have been made. Frank's had a lot of comments on his videos about the decisions that we've made. So we've got to talk about how we came to those decisions, right?
Exactly. And I mean, there's a couple of major ones. There's a lot of little ones that we did. And I mean, those of you who bought boats will know a lot about how you go through these ideas, how you talk to your broker about those ideas.
Brokers know nothing.
And James is not only a broker, he purports to service and fix as well. So he helped me in the decision as to whether or not to buy it.
Some pretty big decisions were made along the way, not just the buying of the boat, which we all know, well, a lot of people know that this boat sat on the market for a long time, right?
Yeah.
2 years at least, maybe
2 years.
maybe going on 3 years. It was listed with Nordhaven for a while, then it came over to us, and you know, why did the boat not sell? Well, my my thinking was the main reason, I think, it was overpriced to start with, way overpriced, and the interior of the boat wasn't very appealing. You can't really see the interior from that angle now, but Frank and Leslie have done an awesome job already of pulling out some of the frills and tassels.
The green velour.
And it looks like a different boat. And if only we'd done that, you know, a long time ago, I think we'd have got the boat sold before now.
Thank God you didn't, because then I wouldn't have it.
Probably for more money too. But no, that wasn't to be. So that's your side of things. I haven't really been involved with that, although we talked about it needing to be done. And of course, talking about resale, because when you buy a boat, you're thinking about how you're going to get out of it again, right? Nobody owns a boat forever. Average is probably 3, 4, 5 years, maybe. I don't know how long you guys are going to own it for, but
well, we had the other boat for 3.5 years, so there's.
You've certainly got to think about how you exit without losing too much money.
Yeah.
You don't buy boats to make money, but you know, you need to come up with a plan to exit without losing money or losing too much money. So I think you're on the right track here with the interior. That looks fantastic. I think I may even have a buyer for it. But the engine room, yeah, I don't know if you're going to accompany this with some of the video of what we did today.
Wow, yeah.
The engine room was pretty disgusting down there.
The engine room was dirty, there's no doubt about it, but it was also mechanically, I mean, it's an interesting discussion, because when the survey was done, it was a little bit of a shock horror.
Thought you were going to walk.
I nearly did walk, very, very. To be honest, I nearly did walk, but what I did was I sat down with James and I said, what's this going to cost, and will you commit to help me get it done?
And here I am.
And here you are.
Still.
And there were a lot of naysayers and a lot of skeptics, but there were some key things that needed to be done. The through holes, the sea chest, so to speak.
There are always insurance items, right?
Wow,
on any survey, and that's the big thing. You know, the first stuff you have to knock out are the insurance requirements. And it doesn't matter how nice the boat is, there are always insurance requirements, and those are sometimes as simple as the fire system needing to be serviced, the life raft, the fire extinguishers,
basic
the
stuff,
shutdown systems and stuff. So that was all on the list, of course. But there were also, and this is a big one, oftentimes, you know, people don't necessarily exercise their through holes. And the through holes on this boat, some of them were stiff, some of them were just not working properly. And when you close a ball valve through hole, it needs to stop the water from coming in. And oftentimes, you know, things get a little bit worn down there, and you close the ball valve and the water's still coming in, so it's difficult to open the strainer and clean the strainer out when there's still water coming in. Well, this boat, and this is probably one of the primary things that we wanted to talk about, right? Why we made the decision to ditch the sea chest and go in a different route. The through hulls, the intake through hulls for that sea chest were 3-inch through hulls and 3-inch strainers. It was all massive hardware, massive for this size boat, right?
Yeah, but I know that's that became prime as to why we had to get hauled out. But initially, it was we're going to overhaul the sea chest and we're going to make a decision on generators. When it became apparent that the through hulls for the sea chest, you couldn't close them.
Yeah, that's right. So on the survey, the sea chest valves it was ugly looking down there. Everything was pretty rusty and corroded, and the sea chest had needed work. And the problem, we were all, well, I say all, Jason and myself looked at the sea chest and were scratching our heads as to how we were going to get to everything, because it was packed in there, really tight. We'd have had to cut fiberglass, and it was going to be a mission.
It's like a lot of boats, right? They build the stuff and then they put everything on top of it.
Yeah, build the boat around it.
Yeah.
So anyway, the insurance had required that we would take care of these the sea chest, and then while Jason and I were investigating the sea chest and trying to come up with a plan, we realized that the intake valves, these 3-inch intake valves, even though they moved, they weren't closing off the water flow.
Exactly. Yeah.
So trying to work on a sea chest in the water, which we had anticipated starting things in the water, was just not going to happen because we couldn't keep the water flow out.
No, and it was significant.
So then we realized that okay, so we're gonna have to pull these through hulls. Now, I happen to have in the shop some new 3-inch, well, relatively new, one careful owner. It's a long story, but I've got these 3-inch through hulls and valves, which I had actually purchased to do some troubleshooting on a boat, which is unusual because we don't really use big 3-inch through hulls on anything smaller than like a Nordhaven 76. Anyway, I had them and I thought, oh, perfect opportunity to sell them to Frank. but it wasn't to be, because Jason shot me down on that. He's like, look at all this other stuff. I mean, you can incorporate a picture of that pile of stuff, right, that Matthew pulled out.
Exactly, yeah.
The strainers, big old strainers. I mean, I don't know of any other 64 that has that 3-inch stuff. But anyway, Jason's sort of, it was almost like a light bulb went off, and he's like, hey, maybe we should just go in a completely different direction. So I have to give credit to Jason on this, because he was the one that said, hey, we should rip all this out and just go with strainers, just individual strainers. Well, Nordhaven doesn't put sea chests in these big boats anymore. And there's a reason for that. I mean, we have all kinds of trouble with sea chests. They can be a real pain. Cleaning them out, especially in the tropics, down in Florida, where we spend a lot of time dealing with barnacle growth. I mean, sea chests get a lot of barnacle growth in them and things get jammed up. Okay, so, most people think, why go with a sea chest? They go with a sea chest so you can minimize the number of holes in the boat, right? But in this instance, think about this. We had these 2 3-inch holes in the boat with old hardware that was, what's this boat, 20 years old. Old hardware that was failing.
Yeah.
If something failed on a 3-inch intake through hull, that's a big hole in the boat to deal with, right?
Yeah.
We've now got a number of holes in the boat, but they're all tiny, really. I mean, in comparison, pretty easy to jam a bung into a 3/4-inch through hull if it broke in the boat. But the reality is, I've been doing this on Nordhavens for 25 years, and I've never had a 3/4-inch or a 1-inch through hull failure on a boat. I think I did have an issue on a really old 46 once, broke off on us. But you're not going to get to that. It's going to be a long time before we start having any kind of failure on those things, and they're cheap in comparison to 3-inch hardware. 3-inch hardware is massively expensive.
So what size is the wing? The wing's an inch, is it? Or
The wing is inch and a quarter.
inch and a quarter?
We did go with the bigger intake on the wing, and then the rest of them are 3/4 inch. So we've got a bunch of holes down there, but they're all small, and they're individual. So if you have a problem with one, it doesn't affect anything else. Unlike the sea chest, where if you have a problem with the sea chest, everything's down.
And they've each got their own strainer too, which I think is pretty cool.
So you can clean the strainers individually. You don't, if you clog a strainer up, again, you're just clogging a strainer for that device, that piece of gear, not for everything.
So you don't think it did not impact the integrity of the boat, really?
Nope, not at all. Not in my mind. In fact, in some regards, I think it made it safer because the holes are smaller and much easier to deal with if there was a problem.
Well, I'll put out some pictures, but you can see from the pictures I've already done on YouTube and Instagram and everything, it's a much cleaner installation. It's a much more operable installation. You can get to everything. You can see everything.
I'm really happy with the way it turned out.
With the way it turned out,
and obviously it performs.
Yeah,
there was a comment about somebody mentioned maybe it would hydro lock because I put the strainers on backwards, but there's a reason that we put,
scoops. Yeah.
Sorry, the scoop strainers. Yeah, the scoops. There's a reason that we put those on in different directions. You may have seen that video that Frank posted, but and I didn't comment on it, but in hindsight, people don't realize when you've got a wing engine and 2 generators that will possibly not be running while the boat's traveling forwards, you don't want scoops to be scooping water when the boat's traveling forward at 8 knots because if there was any kind of slop around the impeller in those units, either the generators or the wing engine, you don't want to shove water past that impeller pump because you could be shoving water into the generator or into the wing engine. So that's why we have those scoops backwards, so that you're traveling along, there's no chance of shoving water up into that unit and filling the engine with water. Conversely, you've got a water maker, you want to shove water into it. So when you're traveling forwards at 8 knots, anything that you can do to help the water maker get water is beneficial. So we have those scoops facing forwards to grab water, right? The hydraulic cooling pump faces forwards also because that assists water flow into the hydraulic cooling pump. And there's no, it doesn't matter. It's not, if it was to scoop water, well, the hydraulic cooling pump's running all the time, but there's no place for it to go where it would cause damage.
The other thing you should just is the flapper on the scoop with the
the flapper that you cable tied shut.
Actually, Leslie did it.
Hope you did a good job, Leslie. So those flappers are just there. We try and pick those scoops because you can open the flappers up and get inside there. Barnacles grow everywhere. We painted them, we anti-fouled them, but barnacles or oysters will grow up in there if the boat's sitting around. And it's nice to be able to snip those open and have a diver get in there and clean out the barnacles. Or actually, the way that we've mounted them in the boat, you can actually take the elbows off and go out with a screwdriver or something and poke the barnacles out from the inside of the boat. You've got a bit of water coming in, but you can do that.
So we hadn't originally planned to haul, but then we did haul, which actually we were going to have to haul for another reason. Well, we eventually came to the conclusion why we were going to haul, because there was a whole discussion about generators.
And it's going to be a long video, this one.
The boat came with 2 25 kW Toyota blocks with 10,500 hours on them.
Which was a challenge for a lot of people when they looked at this boat. What are we going to do with these 10,000 hour generators? And you can tell people, till you're blue in the face that they're good for 30,000 hours. Nobody's going to hear it. All they can think about is 10,000 hours. That's a lot of hours, right? And it is a lot of hours. It's not so much a lot of hours for the actual generator itself, the power unit, the engine, but it is a lot of hours for the bits and pieces on the generator, right? The pumps, the sensors, the alternator.
But you can change those, right?
Well, that's
part of it. But before I made the decision to buy the boat, I actually wrote to Bob Center, who's like the guru of
Walking
Northern
encyclopedia.
Lights, walking encyclopedia of Northern Lights, and he told me those are great engines, good for 30,000 hours. They were Toyota. I know James also spoke to him as we went through the process. But the real discussion that James and I had was, do we rip out both generators? Do we change one generator? Do we overhaul both generators? And we ended up somewhere in the middle.
Well, there were a number of points there that led us to our ultimate decision. One of them being that you can't purchase a new 25 kW here in the US for a US flag boat because of the emissions, right? So that was out. So we couldn't get a Northern Lights 25 kW to replace what we have. So that was not an option. A lot of these boats have a big generator and a small generator, which does make more sense. I understand when people put two generators of the same size in, you only need one set of spares. You can rob parts off of one to make one work if you're in faraway places. I get that, but I believe that you're better off having a big generator and a small generator, as proven here in the last couple of days, right?
Absolutely.
We've been running, okay, so ultimately we ended up putting a brand new 20 kW in and keeping a 25, but going through it and thoroughly changing out and cleaning it up, right? I mean, it was pretty ugly looking. You got pictures of that too.
Yeah.
Cleaning it up, putting all new sensors, putting pumps, putting injectors, putting new seals. We took it off the pan, we put new engine mounts in because they often fail. New exhaust elbow. I mean, everything,
Bearings.
every failure point that we know of on those generators we replaced. Other than the engine itself, which, as we discussed, is a Toyota, and it's still, I mean, it's amazing. The oil is like honey, 10,000 hours. So we now have the best of both worlds because we have a 0-hour generator. Well, actually, I think it's got 5 hours on it, maybe, or 6.
Well, it does now, probably.
But it has basically a 0-hour 20 kW, which works fine for a couple cruising the boat because you don't really need a big generator. You need big thing is trying to keep the generator loaded, and when you're running a 25 kW, you've got to run a lot of stuff to keep.
Well, it's 80 amp rated, and we didn't.
The 25 kW is more than that. It's 100. But if you had a 25 running for 2 people, think what you'd have to run.
Oh, no.
I mean, even this morning we had to run air conditioners all in heat mode, and we had the water maker running and the water heater going, and trying to keep the 20 kW loaded.
We didn't trip it.
We did not trip it,
Yeah.
and it ran like a top. So now we got the best of both worlds because we got a 0-hour generator, so Frank and Leslie can put hours on that generator, and when they come to resell the boat in 12 months or so, that was for Barry. So Barry's looking for the.
Sorry, Barry.
It's going to be more than 12 months. So anyway, 0 hours. So that'll help resell because now we've got a low-hour generator. The other generator, I have to say, looks like brand new.
Runs like brand new. By Jove.
We put a lot of time. We put a lot of time and effort into that generator. We haven't sent Frank the bill yet, but
Yes, well, that's part of it.
it was a little more than we expected because we did go a little further, and it does. The sound shield looks like new, right? Good for
The sound shield is
Matthew and Jason did that.
immaculate.
Yeah, Jason did a nice job painting that up.
Well, I mean, if you go to Yachtek's office in Anacortes, they've got this really cool paint room, and a lot of the stuff was painted, and it's come out.
It's quite useful.
I actually think the sound shield on the 25 is being 20 years old and being refurbished looks better than
the new one.
the new one,
So
except for the clips.
So that's why we ultimately ended up doing 20 and 25. They both look pretty much like new generator. Well, one is new, the other one looks like new. And I don't think it'll be an issue on resale.
Well, it'll be a fool if it's an issue.
Well, because you've got the flexibility of having both.
Yeah.
We didn't really have an option anyway on the 25 because you can't replace it. And we have the old 25 sitting in the shop, which we're going to clean up and do the same thing with, and that'll be sitting in in the shop there. If you ever had a problem, we can just switch it out. We just rip the carpet up and drop a new one in. It was quite a mission actually to get all this done because, well, we had to. They wanted to change the carpet anyway because the carpet was, you know, had to. It was 20 years old and it was a bit busy, the carpet, right? So the carpet got torn out with box cutters and what have you, and then of course that opens up a hatch in the middle of the floor, and then it's much easier to do generator switch outs. Although the exhaust had to come out, so in order to get access to that hole.
But the exhaust, at the end of the day, we needed new gaskets. We needed
we didn't
blankets.
know that, right? We didn't know that. So that's the thing. Once you start taking things apart, you discover, well, in hindsight, it's probably just as well we did all this because those exhaust gaskets all fell into pieces when we, right?
Yeah. Oh, I think we've got a boat. There's mechanically sound. I mean, luckily,
It's performed very well the last couple of days.
well, last couple of days has been. I just feel like I'm back in my element. It's absolutely marvelous. There are a couple of other things that we have addressed. Hydraulic alternators, which I've always been a little skeptical. They're running like clockwork.
I've got to dial the second one in.
The
but
second
yes,
one in.
working
Yeah.
good. We do have a plan to replace hydraulic alternators if Frank and Leslie decide that that's what they want to do. But we put new regulators in, and they do work quite well. The problem is that hydraulic alternators are not very efficient.
No.
They burn fuel, and they create heat. And you know,
But
you've
that
got to
engine
dissipate
room
that
runs
heat.
pretty cool. I mean, the fans.
Well, we are in the Pacific Northwest.
Ah, true.
When you get to the tropics, it's a different story.
What else was pretty? I'll come to the cleaning at some point. No. Oh, so I mean, for me, this is a big deal. We also overhauled the Win, which overall doesn't have a huge number of hours, but it did look like it was suffering from deferred maintenance.
It was throwing out junk on the water.
Junk,
there was definitely fuel coming out. There was fuel coming out of the generators as well, coming out of the exhaust, which was injectors. So we've now got injectors on everything, right?
All 4 motors have new injectors. Even the main engine has new, because for some reason the previous owner had put non-OEM injectors into the Series D.
He did have Detroit injectors on board. I'm sure he got caught at a pinch, probably got caught out, and he had to do injectors, and there weren't any available. But he ended up with Detroit injectors on board, so we put those in.
We put those in, but they've had new coolant hoses. So the main has also had some TLC. All the fluids have been changed on everything. All the injectors are new on all the motors. Obviously all the filters, all the.
I think the big thing now is that main is, I mean, it sounds great, it runs great, it just doesn't look great.
No.
So we've got to do some tidy up on the exterior of that engine. But the Detroit Series 60 is running like a top.
For those of you who don't know James Knight, he's a little bit ADHD. This morning after breakfast, he had to have a shower. Actually, it might have been just before breakfast. I couldn't find him. I went down in the engine room, and he was ass up, head down, inside the bilge of the main engine, having just had a shower.
I didn't want to get your bilges dirty.
The bilges were filthy.
Yeah, well.
So that's one thing. I think I tell a lot by boat whether the bilges are clean or not, and that we're doing that.
How long did it take us? I think we were in those bilges for probably 2 hours, weren't we?
A better part of 2 hours.
2 hours today.
Well, yes, that's right. We did bilges last week too, right? Leslie did bilges last week. We were in the I was in the back bilge. Leslie was in front of the engine. But then under the engine, you know, there was just a lot of sludge and slime and grease.
So we've the last 2 days after we went back in the water. The last 2 days we've run the boat for about 5 hours, and we've run it again today for 2.5, 3 hours. We've been at anchor fixing stuff, and I must say, it makes me feel good. Because
Confidence builder.
Confidence builder. That's the word for it. I'm a lot happier driving it, but the most important thing is the reliability side. I feel a lot more at ease. And one final thing from me, big shout out to Jason and Matthew.
They've done some good work on
They've
this
done
boat.
some
They've
stellar
worked
work.
hard, and
Yeah.
it's a different boat. Yeah, it looks lovely. You know, we knew that there was a lot of potential here, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's why you zeroed in on this boat. There are other 64s out there, and we had looked at other boats, but Frank and Leslie sort of zeroed in on this. They really appreciated what the original owner had put into this boat. I mean, you know, this was a very, very expensive boat to build. It has a lot of high-end stuff in it.
I love the wood.
The woodwork is gorgeous, and
Yeah.
you know, it's just toned down now. I mean, it's just more. It's a bit more neutral, a bit more.
I think the salon is nice.
Yeah, it does. It looks gorgeous. But the mechanicals is really important, and so we, yes,
Otherwise, she's a dock queen.
upside down in the bilge is important. Knowing where that everything's clean and you can see, because if everything's covered in dirt and sludge and grime, you can't see when there's a problem, right? It's difficult to know when there's a problem happening. Actually, and you know, we were down in the starboard stabilizer locker today, and you know, there's always something on the list. Leslie's been making a list today. We've been adding things to the list, but yeah, we found a hydraulic gauge which had been missed. You know, we know that these hydraulic gauges can be a problem when they get old. There was still one on the boat that had oil in it, so it was on its way to failing. I looked through the spare parts boxes, and we found a 1/4-inch plug, and we pulled the gauge out and put a plug in it. That makes me feel a lot better, because that was like so close to blowing out all your hydraulic fluid and really putting a downer on your day. But anyway, it's dealt with, so one less thing to worry about.
So, that's how we came to make a lot of the decisions and why we've ended up here. Thank you, James. Thank you for the training. Thank you for the work.
We're close to the end here, and going off and actually enjoying the boat instead of being upside down in the bilge. Yeah.
Good.
There's lots to see, and there's lots of adventure ahead.
Yeah. And time for steaks and beer.
Yeah.
Steaks and booze.
It's good working with you.
Thank you.
We'll do it again sometime.